Good day, everybody. My name is John Stewart, and I'm one of the coaches here on ehab.care. And today, I want to talk to you guys about what is known as the dry drunk or the dry drunk syndrome. And it's a term that you've probably heard or will hear coming into this recovery context. So the term dry drunk was originally coined by the creators of the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was further defined by the author R.J. Solberg in his 1970 book, The Dry Drunk Syndrome. And he defined it as the presence of actions and attitudes that characterize the alcoholic prior to recovery. So essentially what that's saying is that some people are able to put the chemicals down, but that's all they do. Very little else changes. Now, I'm gonna share my personal experience of the dry drunk syndrome, because I believe that I was a dry drunk for the first 4 or 5 years of my journey. I walked into a homeless shelter called the Ark in Cape Town in April of 1998. Asked for help, and that's the last time I used mind and mood altering substances. So I checked in there. I ended up staying in the Ark for 3.5 years, mainly because I was too afraid to leave. I'm not sure how I was going to normalize or fit in with the rest of the world. So I created a comfort zone for myself there in the Ark, and I stayed in the Ark. But even though I was chemical free, my attitude didn't really change much, or my belief system, or my thought life, or the way I behaved didn't really change. I was hostile, I was resentful, I was angry, I was sarcastic, and I was still dodgy. So after 3.5 years, I left the Ark. I moved into Fish Hoek, which is in Cape Town, South Africa. I joined a church there, and very naively, and also in my arrogance, believing that because I'm 3.5 or 4 years clean, that it somehow qualified me to rescue all the addicts in that part of Cape Town. And in those days, it was very much a methamphetamine thing, or tick as we call it here in South Africa. So I put a notice on our church door, which was on the main street in Fish Hoek, free drug counseling, or something to that effect. And very quickly discovering that I knew nothing, that I was completely out of my depth and over my head. Because the response to that sign on the door was phenomenal. I mean, people just started pouring in looking for help, both the addicts and very much the significant others and the families of many of those methamphetamine addicts in that area. And quickly coming back to earth with a massive bump, suddenly realizing that I actually know nothing. I've opened Pandora's box here. I've got no clue what I'm doing, how to counsel these people, what to suggest to them. And feeling overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed, feeling lost, feeling stupid, feeling embarrassed, feeling ashamed even, and being stuck in my arrogance of not really asking for help. That's also one of the hallmarks or characteristics of dry drunk people, is that they're very self-sufficient and very self-driven. But I was in a unique space, and I prayed to God I am a believer. I prayed to God, please help me. I've messed up here. I've bitten off more than I can chew, and I desperately need help. And it was shortly after that prayer, maybe even a day, I met Colin Garnett, who is the creator and founder of ehab.care. At that time, he was running a treatment center in a suburb called Observatory in Cape Town, which was basically a rehab for the hardcore down and out addicts and alcoholics that were mostly on the streets. He was running a program there. So I met Colin, and Colin came alongside me and started to teach me and mentor me and grow me and really challenge me about my attitude and behavior, which I didn't like. And my initial reaction was, maybe I need to avoid this guy like the plague. But also realizing that, listen, maybe this is the guy, maybe this is an answer to prayer. This is a godsend, and this is the guy I need to get closest to, which is what I chose to do. So this went on for another couple of years, where I started to do my own 12-step work. An interesting point is, I never came into it. My first 5 years, maybe 6 years of the last time I used, I never set foot in AA or NA or in coming to any kind of counseling or 12-step context. But I ended up in church ministry. I ended up being the head of a Christian ministry that I had unwittingly founded and started. And people in the church were treating me as a church elder, minister, the head of a Christian ministry. But I was a massive hypocrite. I mean, I was completely faking it. You know, in church, I was all smiley, nice. You know, the picture of the perfect Christian, the perfect counselor, the perfect head of a Christian ministry. You know, doing all of that, going through the motions, but inside boiling with unresolved grief, rage, anger, and resentment. And all of that would come out when I'd go out the church and across the parking lot into Long Beach Mall, and all that negativity, all that rage would come out on the service industry. The waiters, the tellers, etc. Really rude, short, abrupt, hostile, toxic even, okay? And actually not even really realizing it. Not realizing it. Colin obviously saw this and started to challenge me on it, which I didn't like, and I don't think I responded well to initially, being told what to do or being confronted or challenged. I come out of a significant addiction where I've been a rebel, a significant rebel, a major problem with authority, very antisocial in my behavior, but also there was a part of me that wanted to change and wanted to grow. So Colin gave me a step 4. By this time, Colin had moved up the Garden Route. He had opened a rehab in Storms River called Bethesda Addiction Treatment Center. And prior to that, Colin had given me a step 4 to look at, to do. And I'd opened that step 4 and had a look at those questions and thought, stuff that. I'm not going anywhere near that. And ducked and dived it. But my situation, my circumstances in the church, in that ministry, in my personal life were escalating for the worst significantly. The resentments were piling up. The rage was becoming harder and harder to control. I was being starting to become hostile and snappy and short with people in the church, with fellow I was in trouble, and I knew it. I reckon I'd relapsed in every sense of the word other than picking up and using. And the only reason I hadn't picked up and used was I never lost sight of the fact that the pain behind me was greater than the pain I was in, or greater than the pain in front of me. I never lost sight of that. I think that's the main reason I never relapsed back into using, but I think I relapsed in just about every other way. So I went up to Storms River to Colin, and I did step 4 there. I was the first client at Bethesda. I spent 2 months there, and I did step 4. And I have to tell you, it's probably one of the most life-changing experiences I've ever had. I dealt with so much stuff. I dealt with my trauma. I dealt with my abuse issues that happened to me. I dealt with my disappointments, my failures, my low self-esteem, my people-pleasing. I dealt with so many things, my resentments, my rage and anger. It was awesome. Coming back to Cape Town, and coming back into my ministry at the church and the church life, and I kid you not, everybody, and I mean everybody, noticed. They were like, wow, what happened to you, John? I was experiencing freedom maybe for the first time in my life, and I think finally in recovery that I'm in today. So I was an unwitting dry drunk. I didn't go through the process ignoring counsel and suggestions from other people. I didn't know any better. Okay, and I think that's one way a person can become a dry drunk. However, in my experience, in my professional life, working as an addiction specialist and an addictions counselor in a treatment center for 15 or so years, I've watched this dynamic develop in many people. Okay, and it can start with why they come to treatment in the first place. One of the things I discovered, and this might sound strange, but one of the things I discovered was that many people come into treatment not to deal with their addictions, but to protect their addictions. They're under duress, so they come to silence people, to please people, keep everybody off their back, maybe get away from their consequences, have a bit of let the dust settle, let the heat go down, come into treatment. They've convinced themselves that they want to stop on a level, so there's quite a big degree of self-deception in play. They come into treatment. Some of them have maybe been in treatment before, so they know how it works. Others will quickly adapt. They'll come into treatment. They'll quickly suss out how it works, and then they'll do treatment. Like if I've been to prison. If I get sent to prison again, I know what to do to survive in prison. I know how to do prison. I know exactly what to do to get from beginning to end. And people do treatment like that. And this is a big contributor to the dry drunk syndrome, is that they've come into treatment with a hidden agenda, with twisted motives, not really to deal with the addiction, maybe to try and control the consequences, to please people. And they go through that process believing that by being in rehab, it's somehow going to automatically propel them into recovery, that when they leave, they'll be in recovery. And this is quite a deadly myth. people that do treatment like that, they come in, they don't really take any kind of ownership or responsibility. They go through the motions, lots of compliance, and leave like that. Might stay off the chemicals. There's some addicts are stubborn enough to stay off and not pick up again, but nothing really else changes. Okay. And the characteristic of those people, the two main or the three main characteristics of those people is they are miserable, they are unpleasant to be around, very little changes in their worldview, belief system, attitude. And I've seen it's some of these guys, some of this type person can be so unpleasant, so miserable, so arrogant, so whatever, that I've seen significant others even attempt to sabotage their recoveries in order to get the person previous back, because the previous person was more tolerable, less miserable. So it's a real dynamic. It's a powerful dynamic. Okay. Another place where you'll see where you'll see the dry drunk is in the rooms, where again they've gone through a process, lots of compliance, no real ownership, nothing's really changing, but they'll go into the NA and AA fellowships and become Captain Recovery. If you've been in 12-step fellowships, you'll know what I'm talking about. That's the very dogmatic, almost Nazi fundamental type, that it's a big time gum flappers, but really quite annoying, irritating, unpleasant people. And some people mistakenly make sponsors out of these people, which is a mistake. If you're new to the process and you're going into AA and NA, do not make Captain Recovery your sponsor. Do not ask them to sponsor you. They are gum flappers, big hollow drums. They've got nothing of any substance to give you or to guide you with. And it's just a question of time before the right crisis comes and knocks them off that pedestal and relapse. Okay? So, there's my personal experience as a dry drunk. I was unwitting though, and as soon as I saw it, and as soon as I became aware of it, I wanted to change it. I didn't want to be that person. And I did everything that I could not to be a dry drunk. I did all the suggestions. I did the work. I followed the guidance. Okay? And I've never looked back since then. My recovery today is awesome. I know what freedom is. I know what joy is. I know what happiness is. I know what it means to feel content. The dry drunk never experiences that. They're too miserable. Okay? So in part 2, we're going to look at characteristics. We're going to look at a nice long inventory. I think there's 10 or 12 characteristics. We'll unpack it a bit deeper and look at a solution. If you can identify this in yourself, firstly that's a plus. Okay, if you can see it in yourself and you want to change it, you're already well into the solution. But we'll have a look at that in part 2. Thanks for listening to me now, and I'll see you shortly. And my mouse has disappeared. There it is. Okay, welcome back to part 2. So in part 2, let's ask the big question. Are you a dry drunk? Listen to these. Have you recently quit drinking or drugging? Are you white-knuckling it and barely holding on? Does your family walk on tiptoes around you? Do you feel angry all the time and have trouble expressing your feelings? Has anyone ever told you they wished you were still using? Or better yet, for years they wanted you to stop using and now they're offering to roll you a joint or pour you a drink? Has anybody called you Captain Recovery? And if any of this sounds familiar, if you can say yes to pretty much all of this, I think the jury's out. You've got something to look at. You've got some work to do. So let's expand. Let's expound. There's a nice word. So we'll go look at the characteristics now. If you can tick all of these boxes, then you're a dry drunk. And I could definitely tick all of these boxes. Not now, today, but back in those early years that I was talking about. So, angry and resentful. A dry drunk never wanted to quit and resents it. And there I was talking about why they came to treatment in the first place. Very often, it's not to deal with the addiction, it's to protect the addiction. They may act out their resentments through passive or not so passive behaviors. You might find yourself walking on tiptoes or agreeing with them just to keep the peace. Ask the people around you, how do they feel about your process, about your recovery, about where you're at? Rigidity, no flexibility, only black or white, right or wrong, good or bad, all or nothing. Thinking and statements. Conversations with a dry drunk can feel more like a power struggle than anything else. And here's your Captain Recovery. Very rigid, very dogmatic, unmoving, believes that the only way that they got clean is the only way to get clean. Will very often come into the household and start bashing everybody in the household with new information. Sarcastic, or as Colin calls it, anger dressed in pink. Not able to express emotions in a healthy fashion. The words come out barbed and hurtful. Dry drunks can be judgmental, very judgmental. And their comments can come across as put-downs. So true of me for a long time. When I look back, I feel embarrassed and ashamed at how I've treated people in those early years. And I wish I could go and make amends to that whole mall. Long Beach Mall, where I used to behave terribly towards the service industry. Extreme mood swings. A dry drunk can be depressed one minute and then blow up the next. They may have an explosive temper, leaving the rest of the family feeling confused, fearful, and anxious. There's always going to be victims around a dry drunk. There's always going to be people that are battered and bruised and walking on eggshells. Emotionally cold. A dry drunk has difficulties expressing all emotions, except anger. They may appear cold and hostile and punish you by withholding their affection. So that's indicative of how they did treatment. They went of why they went into treatment. They went into treatment and faked it. And one of the reasons why I really dislike the fake it till you make it narrative. I think it's a rubbish narrative. I think it's rubbish feedback to give to people. Don't fake it till you make it. It's horrible advice. Every time you blow it, every time you fail, you get up, you take ownership, you take responsibility, and you lean back into the struggle. Okay, not fake it till you make it. This is the consequence, what we're reading here, of fake it till you make it. You get dry drunks. Nothing is ever good enough. No matter what you do, you can't please them. Sugar is too sweet, a donut too round, coffee too hot or cold. A dry drunk will find fault in everything. This is really, really unpleasant and miserable. You owe me. There's a sense of entitlement. A dry drunk just gave up their best friend, and the world owes them for it. A dry drunk will punish their loved ones for making them quit. They justify their anger by saying things like, if you hadn't made me quit, I wouldn't be acting like this. So one of the big characteristics of chemically dependent people is an immense sense of entitlement. And you know what I'm saying when I say that, because you've either had that entitlement or you've experienced that entitlement from somebody you know who you love, who's suffering with an addiction. And again, they go into treatment and they just fake it. And that sense of entitlement doesn't go away at all. In fact, it can probably be even more hostile without the chemicals. Self-pity, poor me, I'll never have fun again. You might as well kill me now. Oh, been there. Yep. Grandiose, an overblown sense of self-importance and worth. A dry drunk views their only downfall as drinking or drugging. Once they stop using, they feel superior to others and want to direct their lives. And this is what I mentioned earlier. They'll come home and they'll start bashing. They'll start swinging their new knowledge around like a baseball bat, psychoanalyzing everybody and projecting all of this on everybody else. Awful people. No humility, sense of entitlement, arrogant, grandiose, bullying, blaming others for their shortcomings. Dry drunks become very good at taking other people's inventory, but lack the ability to see their own. Instead, they blame others for their poor behavior. Feeling bored and dissatisfied with life. A dry drunk may have periods of lethargy. Lethargy. I don't know. It's a big word. Nothing interests them anymore. Their mood is one of blah. So boredom, another big characteristic. Dry drunks are going to find themselves getting very bored very quickly. People in a proactive recovery are very rarely going to find themselves getting bored because they're proactive. Boredom is a choice. People choose to be bored, and it's an angry place. It's a face of anger. It's a complete lack of gratitude and contentment. And you'll never find a happy bored person. Oh, I'm so bored. It's always a bored man. Okay, so it's an angry place, and it's also a choice. And very probably coming from a dry drunk place. Euphoric recall. Glamorizing their past usage. There is a sense of nostalgia for the good old days. A dry drunk may forget that using almost killed them and tore their family apart. So glamorizing the past, glamorizing using, euphoric recall, indulging and letting FOMO escalate. FOMO is the fear of missing out. Takes a lot of people out, FOMO. So there's a whole bunch of characteristics. If you can tick all of those boxes, I think there's the evidence. You don't really need any more convincing. So, how do I change it? No rocket science. Very basic, but very difficult. Recognize it. Can you recognize it? Do you recognize it? Own it. Own it, and you might need to put pen to paper to really own it, because you've got to be specific about what you own, and you can't just vaguely own it. You've got to specifically, in detail, own it. And if you do step work, your step work will demand that kind of self-honesty. Do step work. Here we go. Go to meetings and share it. Share it. Share it to death. Share it everywhere. Expose it every time it makes an appearance. Okay? Humble yourself to admit your behavior out loud, because it might not go away just because of one lecture. You're going to have to work at it, and it's going to keep making appearances. Okay? The difference is you have insight now and self-awareness, and you've started to practice the ability to take ownership and responsibility. Be willing to make amends. Now, that sounds easy, but for some it's hard. And I'm not talking about saying sorry. We don't say sorry. Making amends is if you go and make amends, you're making a proper apology. Okay? You've got to be specific about what you're making amends for, what you're apologizing for. The apology, the amends, has got to be as big as the disrespect. Otherwise, sorry, I'm sorry. That's a slap, eh? That's a, listen, shut up and stop making me feel guilty thing. Sorry. If sorry was a brand of toilet paper, your family wouldn't buy it to wipe their bums with it. They've heard sorry from you that many times. So I'm not talking about sorry. Be willing to make amends means you get really, really specific off the back of self-honesty about your behavior. Yeah? I need help. Go on, say it, mean it, and let people help you. No rocket science. There you go. That's Drive Drunk. Reach out. We're all available. If you want to get into you want to have a conversation with me, you'll get into a deeper conversation about it, come and find me on ehab.care. Or go and look at, there's a good few recovery coaches there. I could highly recommend any one of them. Reach out, talk to one of us. Okay, we can help you with this. We can steer you, we can guide you, we can give you the right step work. We can put the right accountability program around you so that you can start making some headway with this. And that's it. Thanks for listening, guys. Just one more slide. We're just going to say thank you over there, and a few announcements. So follow me there. I want to say thank you to Bethesda Retreat, which is Sober Living with a Difference, here in Plettenberg Bay, where I live. I actually work there, but I do a lot of my lectures there. So thank you, Bethesda, for the time, space, internet, love, encouragement. If you're looking for sober living, go check out the website, see if it's a good fit for you, give us a call. I want to thank Marlene from Kubenka Brands. She helps me with my graphic design. If you want to engage with me more, if you want to get into a therapeutic process with me, come and find me at ehab.care. I'm one of the recovery coaches there. There's a good few of us there. I can recommend any one of them. Come check it out. There's some courses on there, which these videos are all a part of. And on that note, thank you for spending this time with me. Bit of a long session, but I'm sure it's helped. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Very important. Subscribe to our channel so that you can stay in touch with all the new content that's going to be going up on a regular basis. Take care. And my mouse has stopped working.